Over the last month I've been porting each of the characters from Battle for Neighborville into Garden Warfare 2, and it's now time to work on the final character from the base BFN character roster, Electric Slide. So once again it starts off with me trying to figure out what character I want to rig Electric Slide to, since I can't import her animations from BFN. The original idea was to rig her to rather the Disco Zombie, the Backup Dancer, or Zen Sensei, but I thought of another idea that I could use instead of these characters. You see, Electric Slide's main primary has her punching with each of her different hands, so I had to think of a character that would have an animation that somewhat fit with that. So I thought, why not try and rig Electric Slide to Colonel Corn? Now this might sound like a bit of an outlandish idea, but Colonel Corn is one of the few plants in the game that follows somewhat of a humanoid design. He also has an animation that you can use that looks very similar to Electric Slide's. So I grabbed a basic backup dancer model and I decided to rig it to Corn just to see how it would work, and this was the result that I ended up getting. Now I completely forgot to start recording at this point, so I only have a screenshot to show how it would look. But after that I decided to start making the actual Electric Slide model and rig it to Corn just to see if it would still work under Electric Slide's model, because if it didn't then I'd have to find a new character to rig to. So after that test I realised that this was going to probably work out pretty well, so I decided to start getting her voice lines in the game. So now all the voice lines are done, I decided to go back and try and start out the model a bit and make it so her jaw moved, but I wasn't really getting good results, but I'll show you it anyway. You can see here her jaw is moving a bit too much for my liking. And you can see here her jaw moves a bit too much when she turns her head, so it looks a bit weird. So now it was time to work on the primary weapon, which wasn't that difficult since I just had to build it off a Colonel Corn weapon, which already has the thing where she shoots out of both of her hands. This was the first test that I did for the primary weapon. You can see it's got some custom trail effects, but everything else isn't implemented just yet. I then went back and added some more effects to it and also changed the balancing to be on par with what it is in BFN. With everything for the primary weapon working now, it was time to add the sound effects from BFN. Fun little fact about this character, the reload sound uses the same one that Power Cactus uses in Garden Warfare 2. So with the primary complete, it was time to work on her abilities, and as per usual I'm going to work on the abilities from the hardest one to the easiest one, so we're going to start off with the Disco Tornado. So for this I wanted it to work where you throw a projectile and once it hits the ground it will leave the tornado there for a bit. Clearly the effects aren't working properly just yet though. So I made some changes to the effects and this was what I ended up getting. I went back and changed some of the colours to match more of a storm cloud and also added some electric into the effect as well. At the moment this is just a few effects, so I had to go back and get all the balancing from BFN to make it so the damage values are just the same. I made the weapon do damage and this is what it ended up working like. So the final thing to do for this ability is make it so it uses its sound effects from BFN, since it's still using stuff from the shrimp at the minute. So with the Disco Tornado complete, it was time to work on the Funky Bouncer. It's not going to be that difficult because there's already a weapon in the game that works just like Funky Bouncer. And that weapon is for the Shrimp Mech, where you fire a tornado and it drags plants away, so we're going to use that as a base for the Funky Bouncer. So I got the weapon, I made a basic attack for it where it drags plants away, and you can see how it's working here. I had to do a few adjustments to make it so it moves at the same speed it does in BFN, but I changed a few things and this is how it came out. I made it last a bit too long so it sends plants halfway across the map sometimes. Now in BFN the Funky Bouncer has a unique projectile that it uses, so I'm going to have to get that from BFN and put it into Garden Warfare 2. Now even though I've got the model in, it's still not finished just yet, because if you look at the Funky Bouncer in BFN it has a ring around the model, so I'm going to have to add that into Garden Warfare 2 as well. So I went back and I tweaked up the effects a bit just to make it look a bit better, then I went back and got the sound effects from BFN, put them into the game, and this is how it's working. So with that ability done, it's time to work on her final ability, which is called Out of Fight, or it's basically just Energy Warp from Garden Warfare 2. Now you might think it's just going to be as easy as taking Energy Warp and giving it to Electric Slide. Well... You see, the problem is Scientist uses an animation so he can scale himself down while he uses Energy Warp, and Slide obviously doesn't have that since she's built off Colonel Corn, which means we're going to have to use a thing similar to what we did for Nightcap and scale her down during Energy Warp. So I made it scale her down, and you can see here it somewhat works, but the problem is the effects are currently going into the ground. Now between that test and the next one that I'm going to show, there was multiple other tests that I did, but I didn't record them because I was constantly changing stuff to try and get everything working properly, and I didn't think any of it would be worth showing. But multiple crashes in Frosty, multiple crashes in Garden Warfare 2, and multiple new versions of the same project later, this is the effects that I got. So I added some sound effects to it to have the ones from BFM, but at no point I recorded footage of it for some reason, because probably I was just fed up at that point after all the crashes. But now it was time to give this character some metadata, which means it shows her name and icons. So the audio in this recording is a bit scuffed because I was recording stuff for PvZ Replanted, but you can see here she's got some icons now, and you can also hear the sound effects for the Energy Warp. Now it was time to give this character a spotting icon, since she currently doesn't have one and is using the foot soldiers, so I went back and I designed a new icon, and someone suggested that I should show them on screen so you get to see what the icon looks like. It's very low quality because it's only a small icon, but here you go. So you can see on screen in the split screen gameplay that she has an icon now, and I'll show on screen what it looks like too. But now that everything is finished, it is now time to get on to the gameplay for Electric Slide, so I hope you enjoy. So thank you for watching this video, and thank you for supporting this series as I've developed each of the characters from BFN and Garden Warfare 2. I'm unsure if I'm going to go back and do Wizard, TV Head, Wildflower, and maybe even Iceberg Lettuce. But for now, this is the end of the series, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.